The cell on Deimos smelled like recycled air and fear, a particular combination of antiseptic, sweat, and the metallic tang of processed atmosphere that Russo Kellerman had learned to tolerate over the past 8 months. Iron Lake Penitentiary wasn't designed for comfort. It was designed for forgetting. 300 souls locked in titanium-reinforced cells carved into the moon's surface, orbiting the red vastness of Mars like a malignant tumor. Russo lay on his bunk, staring at the ceiling where he'd scratched the days into the metal. 243 marks. 243 days since the trial that convicted him of industrial espionage he didn't commit. Since Artemis Biosynthe's lawyers had dismantled his life with the efficiency of a surgical laser. His cellmate Torres was praying again. The older man knelt by his bunk, hands clasped, lips moving silently. Torres had been here 6 years. He'd killed 3 people in a transport accident on Europa. Negligent homicide, he'd explained once, his eyes empty as the void outside. Now he prayed to gods that felt as distant as Earth. "You hear that?" Torres said suddenly, breaking his prayer. The usual sounds of the prison, the hum of life support, the distant clang of metal doors, the occasional shout from another cell. Nothing unusual. "I don't." There, in the vents. Russo heard it then, a wet, sliding sound, like something organic moving through the prison's circulatory system. Something that shouldn't be there. Probably just condensation, Russo said, though his gut tightened. He'd learned to trust his instincts on Deimos, the ones that said when something was wrong. Torres stood slowly, his prayer forgotten. He moved to the vent above his bunk, a standard filtration grate 30 centimeters square, set into the wall. The wet sound was louder now, closer. "Torres, maybe you should." The grate exploded outward. What came through shouldn't have fit. It was Torres's size once, perhaps, but reshaped by some horrific internal pressure. The thing that had been a prisoner, blue uniform still clinging to patches of its body, landed in the cell with a wet slap. Its arms had split lengthwise, the bones elongating into multiple jointed appendages that ended in hooked claws. Its face was a ruin of stretched skin and exposed muscle, the jaw hanging open impossibly wide, revealing teeth that had multiplied and lengthened into curved needles. But it was the eyes that made Russo's bladder nearly empty. They were human eyes, still conscious, still aware, trapped in a body that had betrayed every law of biology. Torres screamed. The creature moved with terrible speed, its multiple limbs scuttling across the cell floor like a spider wearing human skin. It hit Torres and bore him down to the ground, and what happened next would haunt Russo for whatever hours he had left to live. The creature's mouth opened wider, wider than any human mouth should, and a secondary jaw emerged from its throat. Not mechanical like the aliens in the old vids. This was flesh, pulsing and wet, lined with concentric rows of teeth that spiraled inward like an organic drill bit, plunged into Torres's chest. Torres's scream became a gurgle. His body jerked and spasmed as the creature fed, but what it was feeding on wasn't blood or organs. It was injecting something. Russo could see it spreading beneath Torres's skin like oil underwater. Dark veins radiating from the wound, crawling up his neck, across his face, down his arms. Torres's fingers began to elongate. The nails fell away as the bones pushed through, extending, sharpening. His spine arched backward with a series of wet cracks, vertebrae multiplying, segmenting, turning his torso into something serpentine and wrong. Russo pressed himself against the far wall, his mind refusing what his eyes reported. This wasn't possible. Biology didn't work like this. Bodies didn't restructure themselves in seconds. Bones didn't grow like plants reaching for sunlight. Flesh didn't flow like clay being reshaped by invisible hands. But Torres was changing. His screams had stopped. Not because he was dead, but because his throat was transforming, the larynx collapsing and reforming into something that produced sounds human vocal cords weren't designed for. A low, thrumming moan that made Russo's teeth ache. The first creature pulled back, its feeding appendage retracting with a wet, sucking sound. It turned to Russo, and he saw intelligence there. Not human intelligence, something older, more fundamental. The intelligence of cancer, of mutation, of life that refused to die and instead consumed everything it touched to perpetuate itself. Russo grabbed the only weapon he had, the metal tray from his dinner, still slick with the synthetic protein they called food. The creature lunged. He swung. The edge caught the thing across what had been its face, opening a gash that wept not blood but something clear and viscous that steamed in the recycled air. The creature recoiled, its multiple limbs scrabbling for purchase, and Russo didn't wait. He ran for the cell door. Behind him, Torres rose. The transformation was accelerating. Torres's legs had fused into a single trunk of muscle and bone that propelled him forward in a horrifying parody of a snake's movement. His arms had split like the first creature's, but more extensively, each limb now divided into 3 separate appendages, giving him 12 grasping limbs that clicked against the cell floor. The cell door was locked. Of course it was locked. Russo hammered on it with his fists, screaming for the guards, for anyone, knowing it was futile but unable to stop himself. The door slid open. Captain Voss stood in the corridor, her security armor splashed with fluids that couldn't possibly be blood because blood didn't move like that, didn't pulse with its own rhythm. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with something beyond fear. Behind her, the corridor was a charnel house. Bodies lay in pieces, but the pieces were still moving. An arm, severed at the shoulder, dragged itself along the floor using fingers that had split and multiplied into a grotesque handflower. A torso, everything below the ribcage gone, pulled itself forward on elongated ribs that had burst through the chest like spider legs. And everywhere, the transformed, prisoners and guards alike, scuttling and sliding and crawling in a tide of meat and mutation. "Run," Voss said. Her voice was steady despite the hell surrounding her. The lower levels, the research wing, theirs. Torres hit her from behind. His multiple limbs wrapped around her armored body, and Russo saw the secondary jaws emerge from his friends. His former friend's ruined mouth. But Voss was fast. She triggered her shock baton, and electrical current flooded through Torres's body. He convulsed and released her, falling back into the cell. "Move!" Voss grabbed Russo's arm and pulled him into the corridor. Behind them, Torres screamed, a sound no human throat should produce, and surged forward. They ran. The prison was designed as a series of concentric rings, each level deeper into Deimos's crust, each more secure than the last. The general population occupied the outer rings. The dangerous inmates, the ones too violent or too valuable to mix with the general population, lived in the middle rings. The research wing occupied the deepest level, carved into solid rock, accessible only through security checkpoints that required biometric verification and authorization codes. They were heading down. Voss led the way, her shock baton crackling, her sidearm drawn. Russo followed, trying not to look at the horrors on either side, trying not to see the prisoner whose entire skeleton had erupted from his skin like a flower blooming, bones branching and multiplying until he was a cage of calcium wrapped in strips of muscle and skin. Trying not to hear the wet sounds of transformation, the screams that became gurgles that became something worse than silence. They reached a security checkpoint, a reinforced door that could withstand a small explosion. Voss pressed her hand to the scanner. Nothing happened. "Come on," she muttered, pressing harder. "Come on, you piece of..." The door opened, but not because of the scanner. It opened because something on the other side had broken through the locking mechanism. Something that had been human once, transformed now into a thing that defied description. It had grown, massively. Its body was a tumor of flesh and bone, easily 3 meters tall, its multiple limbs thick as Russo's thigh. Its face, if the clustered mass of eyes and grinding teeth could be called a face, turned toward them with predatory focus. Voss fired. The plasma rounds punched through the creature's mass, superheating the flesh, turning moisture to steam that erupted from exit wounds the size of Russo's fist. The thing roared, a sound like tearing metal mixed with human screaming, and charged. It was fast, impossibly fast for something so massive. Voss threw herself to one side, but one of the creature's limbs caught her across the chest. Her armor cracked, blood sprayed, actual blood, red and human and normal, a shocking contrast to the fluids leaking from the creature. Russo didn't think. He grabbed Voss's fallen plasma pistol and fired point-blank into the creature's center mass. The heat from the discharge burned his hands, but he kept firing, kept pulling the trigger until the weapon's core overheated and locked. The creature's chest had become a crater of charred meat and melted bone, but it was still moving, still reaching for them with limbs that grew new joints even as Russo watched, adapting, evolving, refusing to die. "The door!" Voss gasped. She was on her knees, her armor torn, her chest rising and falling in painful gasps. "Get through the door. Seal it behind you. Not without you. I'm done." She coughed, and blood flecked her lips. "My spine's broken. I can't feel my legs. But you can still get out. Get to the research wing. Find Dr. Okoye. She knows. She knows what they did." Who did? Artemis. Voss's eyes were fading, her pupils dilating. They did this. On purpose. They needed test subjects. Prisoners are perfect. No one asks questions when prisoners disappear. "And you?" She laughed, a wet, bubbling sound. "You're not even supposed to be here. Wrong place, wrong time." The creature had stopped moving, finally dead, its massive form blocking the corridor like a wall of meat. But behind it, Russo could hear more coming. The wet sliding sounds, the clicking of multiplied joints, the breathing that wasn't breathing but something else, something rhythmic and organic and wrong. "Go," Voss said. She drew a grenade from her belt, a plasma charge designed for mining, powerful enough to collapse a tunnel. "I'll give you time. Go." Russo stopped and hesitated. "Your weapon. Take it." Voss unholstered her sidearm. A standard issue Helios 7 plasma pistol, its power cell glowing amber. She pressed it into his hands along with 2 spare cells from her belt. 8 shots per cell. Aim for center mass or the head. These things die hard, but they die. She coughed again, more blood. "Now go, please." Russo took the weapon. It was heavier than he expected, warm from Voss's body heat. He looked at her one last time, this woman who'd saved his life, who was choosing to die so he could live, and found no words adequate. "Go!" she screamed. He went. Russo squeezed past the massive corpse, its skin already beginning to slew off in sheets that revealed the bone structure beneath. A structure that had multiplied and branched like a coral reef grown inside a human body. The Helios 7 felt solid in his grip, a promise of violence, of the ability to fight back. Behind him, Voss began to laugh. It was the laughter of someone who'd seen too much, survived too long, and was finally, mercifully, reaching an end. The explosion followed Russo down the corridor. The pressure wave hit him like a fist, throwing him forward. He rolled, came up running, and didn't stop until he reached the next security door. This one was sealed properly. No damage. No creatures waiting on the other side. Russo pressed himself against the cold metal and listened to the chaos above. The screaming, the roaring, the sounds of transformation and consumption. And beneath it all, a new sound, a rhythmic pulsing, like a massive heartbeat echoing through the prison's bones. Something was alive down here, something big. Russo looked at the security panel beside the door. It required authorization he didn't have. But Voss had said to find Dr. Okoye to get to the research wing. There had to be another way. He was in the maintenance corridor now, the prison's mechanical guts. Pipes and conduits ran along the walls and ceiling, carrying water, atmosphere, waste, power. The air here was hotter, less filtered. It smelled like machine oil and ozone. Russo followed the pipes downward, deeper into Deimos, deeper into the flesh below. To be continued.
If you enjoyed this video, please do not forget to like, comment, or share this video with your friends. Subscribe to our channel to hear more stories like this one.